sorry, I'm late. I needed to kill 2 people just to open that door.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Activated, the show where we talk about games. I'm Pat, and that's Maxim, as you could probably tell. If you're new here, this is a show with Pat and Maxim, and sometimes we have to commit just some light murder in order to make our entrances, and that seems to be the case today, and it also seems to be pretty fitting for the game we're talking about.
The game we're talking about is Hell Yeah! How do we explain Hell Yeah? Hell Yeah is a platformer where your job is to kill all of the monsters so that you can open the door so that you can further in the level or the world or whatever, because they saw your embarrassing photo and now you have to put them in their position because you're the demon lord or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember from the introduction just trying to follow along with what the premise is, and I don't think I ever fully understood it, but it definitely kind of sets the tone for the rest of the game through that introduction of just saying like, hey, by the way, this is kind of off the walls and bonkers, and maybe don't think about it too much because you don't really need to. You're kind of in for the ride, you know? And boy, is it a ride. Chaotic is probably a good way to describe this game. One of the most chaotic indie platformers I've played. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's to an overwhelming extent. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Overwhelming. It depends what you mean by overwhelming, because it's quite chaotic. It has its moments. Like you have to go to motorcycle, you can kill it, you have guns and everything. But at the same time, this game has not aged well when it comes to a lot of things. Like the presentation is, it's hell. Yeah, so what? And there's monsters and everything. But then you have to also look at how the game is run, how the platforming works. And you can feel that it feels a lot like the noughties, the 2010s, Newgrounds platforming game, the Flash games and all that.
Yeah, and even the charm of everything being in hell and just absolutely gory and chainsaws ripping through bones and flesh and stuff. I feel like that theme maybe has lost its novelty a bit nowadays when we play it. I'm sure back when it came out, something like that might have stood out a little bit more. But even then, it wasn't incredibly uncommon to see that. You know, the most popular example is probably something like Super Meat Boy, which to be fair, I have not played, but to my understanding is a platformer that is very mechanically tight. It's hard to say that this platformer in particular feels sound. Very random things would pop up that felt off, and trying to traverse where I want to in the speed that I want to, there was always some difficulty with that, and it kind of felt like you had to struggle a little bit to get there. But I think aged is probably the best way to put it. It feels like it's almost aged more than other games that came out around the time that it did. You know, I also do think that the idea of like a funny indie platformer too, because it is relatively funny. I think this came out during a surge of that, where that was becoming a little bit more popular, and I think now maybe it's been tried a lot to the point where you got to be like really, really funny to actually stand out in that realm in a way, you know. And I think we said something similar with Piku Niku, where it's you have this level of irony interlaced with it, but in a world where most indie games already have that irony, it's not enough to hold it up as a crutch, you know.
The difference between Piku Niku and this one is Piku Niku it has its charms and it has its things, but at the same time it's like, it's slowly getting it drained. This one, I'll be honest, after 5 minutes it's like, I've seen enough.
There's this weird sense of where you feel like you've played the whole game in the first 5 minutes, you know? You start to see that there's not a lot of progression in the complexity of the game. It's pretty simple. Even when you get new weapons, it feels like your method of attacking is kind of just run and gun, you know? Just kind of do whatever chaos that gets you through. I don't know if you ran into this issue, but a lot of the times I was feeling like there was inconsistency with the way you attack enemies too, in the sense that sometimes I would expect to hurt them by like running into them with just the saw, and then sometimes I would just take damage instead of like hurting them with the saw. Some enemies you had to kill with like the saw, and others with explosions. If you think of like Metroid games, right? There's some enemies where you need to shoot a missile at them to blow them up. A lot of times there would be some kind of texture difference, or maybe some metal or like a shell. Even in the old 2D games, so sometimes they would just be like a different color, like, oh, blue means you can't kill them with your regular beam. I was finding a lot of difficulty seeing tells from the enemies of how you actually approach them, and I remember making it feel like, okay, I guess I just try whatever chaos I can, and then something ends up working, rather than, oh, make note of that, this one's this color, or this has this kind of exterior, that means I need this kind of weapon to fight it. Because a lot of times I'm just throwing myself at them, and sometimes I get hurt, and sometimes I don't, and then sometimes I cause a like final smash cutscene, which I never fought. You know, you remember that, the like the final combo? It always come at strange times. I always feel like, do I need to do this right now? I felt like it would like interrupt the flow of gameplay a little bit. And they were cute, you know. They would find new ways to show final smash cutscenes kind of things, but
I had to disagree with you, Dad, because it's probably because I've played a lot of games when it comes to these kind of indications with subtleties, but I could tell the enemies what they do. It's like, oh, they have a spiky top, I shouldn't go attack them. Oh, they are not getting, damaged by bullets. Okay, rocket missile it is. It's more telling for me, mainly because it's based on the character designs that makes me understand what the developers were doing it. Because if they don't have any spikies, or if they're not poisonous, I think I kind of forgot a bit, I'll be honest, but there is indication where some enemies cannot be killed by guns, and some enemies definitely can be killed by guns. Though truthfully speaking, right, I always use guns, so my go-to thing is American guns.
Yeah. Well, I think it was primarily just whether or not the saw worked. You know, in platforming, there's this inherent idea of like, sometimes there's enemies that you can't touch, and sometimes there's enemies that you can touch. In Mario, usually if you jump on an enemy, you're like pretty safe, right? And there'd be times where I would jump on an enemy and think like, oh, jumping on an enemy equals good. But then it turns out it was just because I had the chainsaw, which already feels like a strange weapon to me. To have a weapon that just hurts whatever you touch, it feels passive to the point where it's like, should it even be here? Especially if it only sometimes will do the damage. You know what I mean? Like, It's a weapon you don't really have control of. It just kind of exists.
I think the problem with that is that, and this is based on the character, the control is very, very... Well, not the control, but the character is very floaty. Well, it just feels like you're going to a motorcycle and you're like, okay, I'm going to jump. And it feels like you're going to Pluto or something because you're flying for a long time. I get what they were trying to do, and you have control over it, but it doesn't feel constant, if that makes sense. It just feels like you just deactivated gravity for a few moments. And it kind of sucks because the only thing you can do after jumping is another jump, and you trying to avoid monsters and everything. And I think the problem with this game is that the map is too big and the character is too floaty. And if you have I believe the third level where you don't have the motorcycle and you are basically vulnerable, God, it sucks.
Well, yeah, I think it's like a gimmick platformer, right? Where the platforming kind of relies on a gimmick to make itself interesting. But I think the issue is that the gimmick itself is really not that interesting. This motorcycle saw, it's not something to stand out and make this platformer stand amongst other platformers. And I that's what I was thinking this whole time. I was like, this just doesn't feel like differentiated enough. It doesn't feel special enough. Like, I don't know why I would pick this up over some other platforms. And again, we're playing in 2023 where we get pretty spoiled with indie platformers, but using the saw as like a end all, like this is what makes this game cool, is kind of like, but it's kind of a weapon you don't really control, and it ends up making you more floaty, and you don't really know where you're going to traverse with it. And I don't know, at the end of the day, it's like, it wasn't a good basket, I feel like, to put all the eggs in, if that makes sense.
I don't even think they put enough at the times as well, because then there's these mini games where the enemies you kill can help you make a factory or something. I don't know. And then there's also those whole situation where you have guns, but the guns takes forever to reload, and it's just like, this game is slow. I think the best way to say it is, this game is too slow for itself.
It's so weird. You'd think it wants to be fast. With all the chaos going on, you'd think it would be like a much faster platformer, and that might actually make it a little bit more interesting. But yeah, you do kind of have to play it pretty slow. I don't know. I guess that just kind of softens the blow of these crazy weapons when you have to go, when you have to really methodically approach the level. Because like you said, you take one right turn, then you're going off to Neptune. You know, you start going to space or something.
Yeah. Hell yeah, more like hell no.
Yeah. It's perhaps a product of its time. A bonkers indie platformer playground is something we've seen before, but even then we're not fully seeing that here. So it's just hard to tell the direction that they went for, and maybe had they full committed to just one of those aspects, it could have shined more. But I just don't see myself picking it up over other really good indie platformers out there, basically. Well, and I don't know, is it even fair to call this an indie platformer? If it's technically published by Sega, does that cross it off the indie list, you know?
Apparently the developers are Arkedo, and they only have made Hell Yeah, and also Poof. I do not know what Poof is, but it looks like another platformer.
Well, you guys should join in next time where we talk about Poof. Probably
no,
not. I don't
absolutely not.
Probably
maybe
not
if we get 1,000 likes in this video, but absolutely not.
Yeah, come on. There's at least 10,000 of you clearly, so just 1,000 you gotta leave a like, and then you'll see Poof. Everyone wants to see Poof. I think what people also want to see is maybe your final thoughts on Hell Yeah and your experience with it.
I think it's safe to say, don't play this game. It has its charm. It has its charm where it has some chaotic, it has the whole Saw motorcycle, which is honestly badass in my opinion, but it hasn't aged well. It looks like the noughties, the 2010s Newground games. Some of them work. Some Newground games, it's like, oh, I can play this over and over and over. This ain't it. You're better off playing other platformers, Super Meat Boy or something else, but I would stay away from this.
Yeah, comparing it to a Flash game is very interesting because, the term Flash game can be used to either make something that's like, handcrafted by one person that maybe it's not supposed to hold up like a regular game, or it could mean something that's like something cherished from your childhood, right? Unfortunately, Hell Yeah, it's neither something from it's not like Cave Story. You know what I mean? It's like when you play Cave Story, you're playing a Flash game that you are running into some mechanical barriers because it was originally a Flash game, and some things feel off because of that, similar to Hell Yeah. But the level of charm that's throughout something like Cave Story is definitely more apparent than the level of charm you're going to find in Hell Yeah. Because, I don't know, maybe, and I feel like I say this a lot in this show, but fully committing to one idea to make it stand out, I think is usually a smart idea. There wasn't a lot of full commitment in any of the categories, which ultimately makes it feel like a surface level game. The thing is, I was looking at the Steam reviews, and it seems like it has pretty positive Steam reviews, so it could just be our taste. Some people might be pretty interested in it, but I think you're going to have better bang for your buck by looking at some of the other popular indie platformers out there, because there's no shortage of those these days. You could find something good.
Hell Yeah is around $10 or 13 euros, so whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Speaking of whatever, that's what we're about to say to this episode, because it's like, it's over? Whatever. There's another one coming out next week, and you guys can actually join us for that here on Backlog Activated by hitting that subscribe button and checking out all of our videos when they come out. And I think that's going to do it for us. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Pat and Maxim, and we'll see y'all in the next episode.
Subscribe, or else I'll murder you. I would say in Minecraft, but apparently you can't even say that, so in Fortnite.